Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your hosts, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown and Daniel Paulson. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
If you've ever watched Bondi Rescue, you're going to listen firsthand to one of the lifeguards, and his name is Deano Gladstone. Dean, you're very welcome.
Patrick, it's a pleasure to be here with you always.
And I'm intrigued how a lifeguard comes across breathing, and that's what I'd love the conversation to be about, you know. I think there's going to be an interesting talk in this area. So just if you were to give people just a little bit about your background, I know you said that if you were filming today, etc., but even before that, how you came across breathing, what you strive for, so that people get a little insight into you.
Yeah, well, Patrick, I've got a story that's a little bit similar to your own. I was hospitalized with asthma when I was 9. From there, I was swimming before that, and I'd stopped swimming and hospitalized with asthma multiple times and went back swimming. And that's a common theme in Australia for asthmatics. They get sent swimming by doctors.
I wonder why.
Well, we know the regulation of the breath. Yeah. And the swimming was brilliant for my asthma, but whenever I stopped, I would get sick or my asthma would come back. Now, I struggled at school. University wasn't an option for me. I couldn't spell university. I was dyslexic. I read one of my reports today when I was looking for, or the other day when I was looking for some of my certificates. And it wasn't, Dean was disruptive. Dean was, in maths was the one subject that I was good at. And even though I got first in the class, it said Dean could do much better if he concentrated and put his mind to it. So, these learning difficulties, when I look back, I was a dysfunctional breather, and actually the swimming sort of fed into that dysfunction, I believe. And it's really only the last 5-8 years that I've completely got on top of it. And one of the things I tell people is that I feel smarter from taping my mouth shut at night and my nasal breathing, and they laugh, but I do follow it up.
In terms of swimming, you feel that swimming actually contributed to dysfunctional breathing?
Well, swimming was my main sport, Patrick. I was swimming 8-10 times a week.
And you reached a pretty good level as well, obviously.
Yeah, I reached a great level at 18. I had a national ranking of 2 in the 400 meters, and where was I? 7th or 8. At this time, though, there was some fantastic swimmers that were, Ian Thorpe was at Olympic level, and he was a couple of years younger than me. It was, I was good, but I wasn't, great. I competed for the local surf club. I made representative teams. We won races. But yeah,
it's still a great accomplishment. Super. But coming back to it, because when I think about swimming, and doctors do recommend, at least in my day, they did as well, I'm not sure if they do today, that if a child was susceptible to asthma, they told the child to go and swim. Now, I'm not sure if the doctor actually understands why. Our take, as you know, Dean, is that when you're swimming, the water is pressing up against you, so that you're breathing against resistance. And this is going to reduce the volume of air that you breathe relative to what you need. And it's also pressing up against you so that it's going to add an extra load onto the breathing muscles.
Yeah.
To help to improve strength of the breathing muscles. And then, of course, the child does some dives and they go down into the water and they're doing breath holding, and carbon dioxide is increasing in the blood, and that's helping to open up the airways. And yes, people often say, well, when you're swimming, you're mouth breathing. Yes, but you're only mouth breathing maybe once every 3 or 5 or 7 strokes. So there's a number of reasons why swimming is beneficial. But as you alluded to, when you stop swimming, your asthma come back. And that's why, probably due to, there's no guidance for the kids who are swimming, but when they come out of the pool, what do they do? fatigue is very common with asthma. And, Australia is one of the highest instances of asthma in the world.
I'm fully aware, yeah. I worked with a young child yesterday with asthma, and her mum was brilliant. She was onto it, but we went through, a couple of the pillars of functional breathing, and, just sort of broke everything down for her. And, she took a lot away from that session.
And funny enough, because my background was Buteyko, it still is Buteyko, and Australia was the first country in the world that Buteyko landed in, outside of the Soviet Union. And it was somebody that was flying from the USSR to Australia, but had an asthma attack on board. And there was somebody on the plane at the time that brought them out of the attack by using the small breath holds, breathing recovery exercise. So it's quite interesting. I know there's always, it's difficult for non-pharmaceutical approaches, though, to kind of make headway. But a little bit of the history there with Australia. So you're working with a young child. What age was the child?
She was little. How old was she? She was 3 or 4.
Oh, she was tiny.
Yeah. And I couldn't get too close to her at all. So it was more an educational session for mum, and I ended up doing all the exercises with mum, and got mum to understand fully what's going on. And mum was going to have to go home and do some assessments and try and explain it to her again. But that's part of the action plan.
It's huge.
Educating the parents.
Yeah, because these kids, they have a stuffy nose. As you said, they can struggle with sleep. They are tired. If you're tired, you're not going to do so well in school. And you can have a very bright child, and they're falling back because of fatigue. None of us can concentrate if we've had a bad night's sleep. So taping of the mouth. Sorry.
She'd just done some work expanding the roof of her palate. And we were hypothesizing whether that made her airway smaller or what was going on in that.
It's a little bit like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
So, the child could be born with quite a high palate. And even in the womb, when I was talking with Professor John Mew there it was just before Christmas, having the tongue resting up in the roof of the mouth in utero helps to develop the top jaw, but sometimes the child doesn't necessarily have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, or at least that's what I took from it. So a child
was breastfed. Does that would obviously
makes a big difference, right? Big difference.
But so she her mum was on board, which was she was seeking out a drug-free option.
Plus the very fact that the child is undergoing maxillary expansion at 3 years of age, the mum knows about early intervention. And it's not a particularly easy approach. The traditional approach is an easier approach, but at the same time, her approach is helping to develop the jaws and the face. So coming back to you, so you were a child with asthma. You were swimming, and what happened then, or what's?
I struggled at school, Patrick. There was really no opportunity for me to. And no interest really in sort of going on for any formal education. I sort of had lacked direction, and ended up starting a trade as a plumber with some local guys from the surf club.
That's all right.
I enjoyed that, and the dust from working in rooms and that used to get in my throat, and I used to get sick. I used to get sick quite a lot. And training a lot, I used to get run down all the time. What do they call it when you're run down? My mind's gone blank. And chronic fatigue. So I used to sort of, train, all that training would end up with chronic fatigue. Now, looking back, my diet was horrible. I'm sure I was mouth breathing at night, and it just had no understanding of sort of no connection with my body, but still doing relatively well at my sport. My social life was all right. My family was really supportive. Life wasn't bad. I wasn't breastfed as a child. There's a couple of connections that I've sort of gone back through, but I sort of really struggled with the breathing and sickness, and I started doing yoga in my mid-20s. And when I started doing yoga, I started to get some of the regulation of my breath, and I believe it was the regulation of the breath. So breathing sort of every third stroke or every fifth stroke, that helped me the most. And yoga started giving me what swimming was giving me, and really, when people talk about breath work, swimming for me was breath work, and then yoga was breath work. And I went on to become a yoga teacher, or started teaching yoga, and started sort of coaching people. I had a bit of a life incident where I was king hit and had my 4 front teeth knocked out. So there's some horrible photos on the internet if you want to look them up or share them. But that pretty much was the best and worst day of my life. That destroyed my health. That gave me anxiety, post-traumatic stress. I ended up with dermatitis and allergies. So I used to scratch myself till I bled at night. All these food allergies and sensitivity, gluten sensitivity, sugar sensitivity. So I was so stressed and broken, and I sort of had the whiplash, which this tooth's fake. You probably can't tell.
No, I can't tell at all.
Yeah, you can tell from underneath. So after that, Patrick, that was 2005.
That's when that was going on a lot in Australia as well, the King Punch.
The laws have changed significantly since.
They did, but they had to, because just for the listeners, you could be just going about your normal daily routine, or maybe after a nightclub and you're standing on the footpath and some guy comes over and gives you a full force whack in the face. It's crazy stuff. And we were hearing about that over here, so we were. So the judges then started putting really strict and harsh sentences, and that quelled it down a bit. It shouldn't even be called a king punch. It should be called a coward's punch.
Yeah, coward's punch. That's what that's a campaign to call it a coward's punch. So after that, I had this hypersensitivity to everything, and I ended up with a guy called Paul Chek, or a Czech practitioner.
Yes.
We went back and we sort of re-looked at everything. And I was with this guy named Aaron McKenzie, and he was talking about forgiving the guy that did it to me. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this guy talking about? Yeah. But then we went and looked at my nutrition, we looked at my breathing, we looked at my hydration, and we looked at my body holistically, and we just started to change everything. And when I went on to study my health coaching through Czech, I was working full time as a lifeguard at this stage and didn't really know why I was doing it. But regardless, did it. And that's when I first started to teach people to breathe diaphragmatically, sort of 2010, 2011.
So it's really interesting. And I'm just going to come back to the guy, right? Because I think many of the listeners here who have faced trauma, Dean, unfortunately, life is life, and we've all probably faced it. We've all had, some issue. But he said for you to forgive the guy, and I can understand it is a very, very difficult thing. But I suppose his motive is, our alternative is that it eats us inside, that we keep on thinking about it, and that we have a hatred towards the person. And it's a very natural human thing as well. I would do it too. I'm sure everybody else that's listening have been in that situation. So somebody is after doing some grievous harm, and they've done it once, but we continue to rehearse it over and over and over. And now the point is it's actually doing us harm. So there is something about that, even though it's not easier, it's a much easier alternative than just kind of dwelling on it. It was an interesting...
Speaking to the psychologists and reliving it over and over again actually made it worse for me. Because I'd bounced around from different people, doctors trying to put me on sleeping medication. I had high cholesterol. They wanted me on cholesterol lowering drugs.
Which are very controversial. Statins.
The statin drugs are not nice. I read a book written by a doctor who had a horrible incident with the statin drugs. But so from my experience then, mainstream medicine, and I don't want to, nothing against mainstream medicine, but it wasn't able to really give me what I needed.
Yeah.
This Czech coach, Aaron McKenzie, was brilliant. And by changing my diet, I rebuilt the body from the ground up. We looked at thoughts, breathing, the way the Czech sort of totem pole was, the thoughts were at the top and breathing was next. So before nutrition, before movement, your breathing is right up the top of what they look at when they're assessing someone.
That's really interesting.
Which was mind-blowing. And how he came to that, he was coaching these athletes, and he could give them the best program in the world. But if they're not thinking right, then and they're not breathing right, there's no point. Not eating right, the best program in the world is not going to work for them.
Yeah.
And we know it now. Like,
yeah.
I used to sort of look and try and teach people those 6 things. Now I'm particularly focused just on the breathing. Yeah. And I know how powerful that is in some cases for people doing 10 minutes a day.
Mm.
And some mouth taping at night, which is just an absolute game changer. Again, not for everyone. For some people, some people are naturally breathing nasally at night, but there's a lot of us who aren't.
50%, I would say, over the years. And waking up with a dry mouth is a good indicator if you have the mouth open during sleep. So you're talking about breathing here. For somebody who isn't into breathing, and I'm assuming they are because they're listening to this podcast because it will be on our channel, but who knows? What do you think is the biggest? Like, I have my ideas in it. What do you think breathing has gave you? What's the best advantage it has gave you as a tool in your everyday life? Is it your physical performance? Is it your mental performance? What is it? Or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a combination, Patrick. I'm 44 now, and I feel like I'm getting, stronger and smarter, and I'm continuing to grow and evolve. Yeah. When I was young, I was super fit, but I used to get sick all the time. I used to on the edge of chronic fatigue. We used to compete at the Aussie titles every year, and I used to go and get like an antibiotic script from the doctor just before the titles, because you used to just train yourself to fatigue and exhaustion. So yeah, that connection, that mind-body connection that I have now, and that understanding, and I'm able to sort of push my limits and work 7 days a week, and and even sometimes go without sleep and still not get sick and still function pretty well. I'm a father of 2, or my girlfriend's got 2 kids as well, so we've got 4 kids and 2 dogs sometimes, and life
it's a big household.
So yeah, it's everything, but I feel like I'm just performing so much better. And I never thought I was capable of getting up and public speaking or teaching people anything. And that's when I got attacked, my body stopped working. And part of my stress or fear was, without my body, I was unable to be a plumber or a lifeguard. And that was my ability to earn an income. And so that was taken away from me. And that added to my stress even more.
Yeah, no, totally. The chronic fatigue is interesting because we've came across it before in top athletes, that they're pushing and pushing and pushing, and the whole mode of our idea in the Western world, well, it may be changed now, is keep doing it, keep pushing, keep breaking it down, and you achieve what you need to achieve. And was there ever any mention of recovery? Because if you were working with an athlete today, is that athlete still predisposed to chronic fatigue today, or was that just something that happened 15, 20 years ago? My point here is there a greater emphasis now on recovery in professional athletes or even recreational athletes, in terms of, yes, you push yourself hard, but make sure you recover? How do you recover?
Yeah, absolutely. Recovery is huge. Some of the old school swimming coaches, like they're brutal. Like they just push people till they break, and they have success. And I think there'd be an inverted, like a hormetic stress, an inverted U graph, where some people are able to tolerate all that work and they perform, whereas others don't need it. And it's the individualizing of coaching is what people need. So the athletes I've worked with have sought me out. And it's always different when an athlete seeks you out, as opposed to, I'm working with a couple of professional clubs, as when you go into a club and work with the whole club. So, and that's the same even in workplaces. People seek you out for a one-on-one session, and then, I want you to come to my work and teach everyone. And you get in there, and people, or teaching on Zoom, they don't even have their screens on. So they're not quite, they don't have the buy-in.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Somebody that seeks you out, they know a little bit about it and they know there's something in it. But when we think about recovery, it's not necessarily that we're doing recovery to bring us back to where we are. But you pointed to it. You've improved concentration. You're more resilient. You're better able to handle stress. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you've kind of alluded to it anyway. Yeah. Recovery is really about building yourself up. So just as you train hard to build yourself up, by practicing techniques to improve, to recover. So down regulation, light breathing, slow breathing, nose breathing, low breathing, relaxation, saunas, things like that. That's all part of the recovery. And that then brings you to a higher place that you're more resilient and you're better able to cope then with the hard work. So it should be part of somebody's training. But Dean, like sometimes in my head, I feel that, well, I think it's changed a bit. Like when I wrote the Oxygen Advantage book, I never put the word breathing into the title. And there was a reason being is because that was only in 2016, 2015, that people thought about breathing and they're thinking about this woo-woo and all of these nonsense, you know, the kind of all the paraphernalia that goes with it. There's nothing woo-woo about that. Is that changing in Australia, do you think? Is it still woo-woo?
Slowly. I was working with a professional rugby league club this year, and actually this week, and I was there, and it was the first session, and I've got 4 weeks with them, and we're talking about breathing, and it was I'm working with a mental skills coach, and the breath work complements the mental skills stuff beautifully. They're so connected, but you know, he introduced me, and next week we'll do BOLT scores and MBTs and CO2 tolerance assessments, and we'll do all the stuff. But I wanted to get up, and because he didn't say breathing for performance, and that's what I wanted these guys to know, that breathing will help their performance. Because I felt, you know, there may be a little couple of thoughts that it's just going to be a meditation for them, and yeah. But the recovery stuff is more and more talked about. You know, HRV, these words, when I was first doing my stuff with the Czech Institute, the words parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, they were a little bit jargony. These words are common knowledge now in Australia. Like if you say that to a high school kid, they know what this stuff means. So there's definitely a huge shift. But on the professional level, I still see an element of push.
I can't see why they shouldn't do it. And I'll just tell you this, right? Can you imagine a player out in the field and they have to hold their attention to be fully involved with their attention on the game? We're talking 50, 60, 70 minutes. And if the mind wanders, they've lost focus. And when physical fatigue sets in, mental fatigue is setting in. Has anybody taught any of these guys how to concentrate, to hold their attention? And breath comes in there because if your physiology is in a state of balance, if you have good night's sleep, and a lot of rugby players are prone to sleep apnea, and also not so much, I suppose, Aussie rules, but some of the bigger guys would be because if they have a wider neck circumference, they're more prone to sleep disorder breathing. They're waking up feeling tired. Their head isn't going to be in the game. But I remember like working sometimes with athletes, and I'm feeling if I'm getting some pushback, I'll push them. And I'll start off easy enough, and I'll talk about, you know, mental and physical fitness, and then I'll get them doing some long breath holds. And literally the joke is I'll turn them blue, and then they know there's something in it at the end of it. We need to get people to experience it because, again, we have to get away from that whole, this isn't about meditation. This is about, you know, you can do breath holding to cause adaptations, you know this, adaptations in the body that are stronger than doing a sprint at the highest intensity that you can do. But there's no trauma involved with it. There's no risk of injury. Now we're not saying to go blue, but we're saying to challenge yourself, but to recover within a couple of breaths. So it's the forgotten gem in terms of training.
Yeah, I had an interesting issue with some of these rugby league players. Their noses are banged up. So I didn't actually want to increase their stress by telling them they had to breathe nasally at night. I was trying to position it in a way where it would be optimal if they could.
Yeah.
sorry, I was going to say it's an interesting thing there. And people are aware of focus and attention, but they're not aware of the science behind it. That's in my opinion. And I think I can relate that to being a lifeguard. You know, when people are in a rip, the advice is don't panic. That's the advice to someone who's potentially drowning. And in Australia, 400 people drown every year. So it's quite significant. So, you know, you can't teach someone how to deal with stress when they're potentially in a life or death situation. So for me, part of my interest in what I'm doing and what I'm sharing is teaching people the science behind don't panic. And we know that's very much connected to breathing.
Yeah, it's seeing it, because if you panic, you're going to make mistakes. If you panic, what happens? You use your reserves, you do the wrong thing, you're splashing about in the water, and you're going to get tired. Is that the whole?
Yeah, that's it. And it's actually counterintuitive, Patrick, because you're in a rip, you start to panic. You go into fight or flight, your heart rate increases, those, you know, our pupils dilate, and we see the shore there, and we think, yes, I've got all this energy, I should go to shore, when in actual fact, they need to relax, conserve energy, stay calm, and stay afloat. And there's a new campaign out, and it's called Float to Survive. If people can just float, they potentially float onto a sandbank, or someone will come and save them.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. So
some stress responses, when you think about it, are counterintuitive, right? We go into stress, you know, our brain the blood goes away from our analytical brain, and we just
all we want to do is get out of the situation. Yeah, but we do the wrong thing in any situation. That's like right. If I'm here with my crew, and if I was to go into a panic mode, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing, you know, that kind of way. And when you think about even the measure of a leader is the individual who's able to maintain calm and focus when things are going wrong. Like, look at any football game, you know, and you've got the losing side. But if you have one or two really capable individuals on the losing side who are able to stay calm, stay focused, stay motivated, and rally the troops, and, you know, that can be the difference between winning and losing. I'm going to come back to the rugby guys, because a lot of them have had knocks and elbows, and even in soccer and different games. And I'm sure Aussie rules, there's a few noses that are not working so well. It's very common. It's about 60% of the Western population have a deviated septum. And what I mean by that is that the line that divides the left side of the nose to the right is crooked. So it impairs airflow then through either one side of the nose or the other. Now, it's a really common question, and I'll say it because sometimes people will be thinking about, well, I have that nose, can I actually breathe through it? I'd say to them, once you're not pregnant, of course, or if you don't have panic attacks or anxiety, take a normal breath in and out through your nose, pinch your nose, hold your nose, and do the nose unblocking. Walk around holding your breath. And continue walking and holding your breath until you build up a moderate to strong air hunger. Then let go. Get your breathing under control. Wait a minute, do it again. Do it a few times. And see, does your nose open up? Because if your nose opens up, then you know that your obstruction is due to reversible. But if it doesn't open up, then you know it's more mechanical. Now, for the mechanical, then we can use the Cottle maneuver. So you put one hand either side of the nose and you just gently prise. Does that make life a little bit easier? Yeah. And to use a breathe right strip or something during sleep. So I would say,
when I teach the nose unblocking exercise, Patrick, I've modified it to include breath holds and this sort of like a face massage. And I find it really effective to get people massaging in the face, pulling the nose one way, pulling the nose the other way whilst they're holding the breath. And I love using a little bit of diluted peppermint oil in some MCT. It really it's a game changer for people.
Great. So this is helping then with drainage.
Even up here, we've got some
sinuses,
nasal cavities. So yeah, it can, all these and you can just hear that their breath change.
Because if the nose is stuffy, it's not just a stuffy nose. Sleep is the biggest thing. And if sleep is affected, concentration and focus is affected. But also, if the nose is stuffy, the person is going to breathe through the mouth. Mouth breathing is going to cause upper chest breathing. You've got reduced recruitment of the diaphragm. This impacts functional movement. So dysfunctional movement, then the player is more prone to injury. So there's a lot going on with the simple nose that we don't think about. You know, even visual spatial awareness, our ability throughout our evolution, our ability to have our focus on, if we're hunters at the time, we had our focus on the deer or the animal, the prey, but we were also scanning the environment for any threats. So if there was an animal that was going to eat us, so we had our focus on the animal that we wanted to eat, and at the same time we had to be scanning for any animal that wants to eat us. And that visual spatial awareness is improving nose breathing. So you can translate that into today's. You're out in a football field. You have your eye on the ball, but at the same time, you're watching, you're scanning everything, and you're doing it. And so the mouth breather is not going to have as good a visual spatial awareness than the nose breather. So yeah, there's so many different things. You know, the more we think about the nose, it's actually quite fascinating, isn't it? So here's a question. During swimming, should you have the mouth open or should you be breathing through your nose? What's your take on it?
I haven't fully tried. Well, I've tried to nose breathe swimming a couple of times and it was very unsuccessful. So yeah, I don't think it's possible whilst you're swimming.
And is it because the water?
Yeah, the water.
You're sniffing the water into your lungs, which is not going to work.
And when you're swimming, you need to shortly and sharply breathe in and hold. And then you actually exhale through the nose when you're swimming. So the nose is involved. But then for swimmers, it's really important to get them a sort of nasal breathing, you know, the other 23 hours of the day, particularly at night, and just get in, you know, potentially 5 to 10 minutes of nasal breathing just to retrain that or you know, encourage that behavior, reinforce it.
The BOLT score on the maximum breathlessness test must be a helpful score for swimmers, because you were talking about, say, for example, taking a breath every 3 strokes. Do some swimmers take a breath every 5 strokes? Do some of them increase it to one breath every 7 strokes? Does that happen?
Yeah, so when I swam, we used to do hypoxic training, and you do drills. You do 3, 5, 7. You were trained not to take a breath in between the flags and the wall. And, you know, when you're really tired, you lift your head before you turn to get that breath in, which the coaches used to get cranky at. So, yeah, we were training CO2 tolerance in the swimming, but, yeah, not understanding the exact science behind it, which is amazing to me. It's mind-blowing.
It's amazing.
I spoke to a great American coach the other day, and he didn't know. He knew the basics of hypoxic training, and I think it's more hypercapnic training than hypoxic, to be honest. And he just didn't really know the fundamentals of it, and that's, you know, how these high-paid coaches don't know more about it is mind-blowing. So I'm hoping to do some work with him, as my background was swimming, and I think you know, with some easy interventions that I've already mentioned, would be able to get some great changes and stop people from trouble down the track. We'd be able to prevent things years ahead.
We would be able to prevent?
Yeah, prevent sickness, prevent injury, improve sleep, like the compound interest on nasal breathing over time from all the things we've mentioned. You know, getting sick less is a game changer. Sleeping better, and everything's connected to everything else we're talking about. And you know, whilst we can't put exact values and figures on it, but it's certainly more than a 1%. And if a person's a dysfunctional breather, when they come to my workshops, we sort of do a big group assessment. And sometimes people have some really low BOLT scores and struggle with the MBT. And I said, listen, you are going to get the most out of this course. This is going to be really life-changing for you, this course. And, you know, the people over there that did really well, they're not going to get as much out of it. Yeah. So I like to frame it like that.
A swimmer with a low BOLT score, what will that translate into?
Well, they're an overbreather. They're super fit whilst they're mouth breathing. And you know, you would have seen successful athletes that are mouth breathers, right? You know, I did really well Although I got sick a lot, my posture was poor. I wasn't doing well at school, but I was sort of performing pretty well as a swimmer, as an athlete. I had shoulder problems and that over time. So I think, the longevity and the posture, there's so many things connected to breathing.
Would there be another aspect that if you're swimming with a low bolt score, that you're going to have more difficult taking the breath every 3, 5, or 7 strokes because you feel a stronger air hunger?
Absolutely.
And the reason that you want to take less strokes going across the pool is it because of loss of propulsion in the water?
So in the 50-meter sprint, they take 1 or 0 breaths
across the 50 meters.
Across the 50, yeah. I think they do that in 21 seconds, sort of 22, maybe 20 years ago, so that they are getting faster. But yeah, generally sort of people breathe every 2 or every 3 strokes. I'm not involved as much. I do hear stories, I'm delving into the research and seeing stuff about people trying to improve their stroke efficiency. I still think there's value. The more value is getting the better sleep, getting the better recovery, nasal breathing in between sets, nasal breathing before the race to calm down, or for some people, maybe lifting their energy up. I don't see when people are racing.
So you're talking about preparation pre-competition.
Preparation,
so using
training,
breathing to change your states.
Sleep, health.
Yeah.
Getting sick less from nasal breathing is going to improve your performance. In the gym, it should be all nasal. Our foam rolling. But, for a swimmer, if I was coaching, every 2 or 3 strokes in a race would probably be, unless they're doing sort of that 50 or 100 meters. I like to work with individuals differently, and I like to assess and reassess. And the Bolt score and the MBT are brilliant for that. But, specifically for a swimmer, we'd be looking at their time. And the swimmer that I worked with, they had a set where they used to do 5 400s on repeat on a certain number of time. And that was a good gauge of how he was going. And this guy we got some mouth taping, we got some nasal breathing, didn't modify how he was breathing when he swam, but we modified how he was breathing the rest of the day. And I actually got him training less because I felt that he was overtrained. And he was fearful of that. And I said, listen, let's just assess it with your 400s. And he was able to, I guess, have the confidence. People need to be empowered, Patrick.
They do. Yeah. One of our instructors, I don't know if you know him, Leo Daniel Ryan. He's based here in Ireland. He's a strength and conditioning coach. He ran a marathon without training for the marathon. He just did breathing exercises, which is amazing, really. So you're talking about, you're introducing to a swimmer, you're saying to cut back a little bit of training, but we're going to give you breathing exercise instead, which will help to maintain and even improve your form, because we're targeting, like, I suppose, Dean, it makes sense because respiration is the thing that often holds you back. That sensation of breathlessness. And if you have an athlete with a low Bolt score, their breathing is very inefficient. So really what we're doing is, by training breathing, is we're training them to do more with less.
Yep.
So with every breath that they take, that they can get more out of it. And what you're saying is, you're not too concerned about how they're breathing in the pool because you don't want to interrupt their game, which is fair enough. But you're looking at their breathing for the other 23 hours a day. And I think that's the nugget. That's what's being overlooked, No,
we could definitely, in training, Patrick, we could definitely load up their hypercapnic stuff.
Okay.
Those hypoxic drills, do the 3-5-7. But when we come to racing.
Racing. Yes.
I think when we're racing, we want
I agree with you.
max. We want to get as much air in as possible.
Yeah. During a race, I will always say, or even during a competition, I was working with a boxer before Christmas there, and he's going for a world title in March. And, it's working with an athlete of this caliber. It's tremendous because they'll take everything on board and they put it in, and they're so driven. And it's almost, you're training them to go through a brick wall, but it's about conservation of mental energy and physical energy. To be able to last 12 3-minute rounds. And My point is gone in what I was going to say, but yeah.
If people don't understand, if anyone's done 3 minutes of boxing, they will know how tough it is. And then to think of, like you said, someone punching you, like the respect that fitness boxers have.
Oh, it's an amazing fitness, but it's also it's a mental thing as well. You know, it's that fear of getting into the ring, that your opponent is there. Like you're going out to have a fight. Okay, the gloves are on, but the gloves, you still feel it with the gloves on. You know, it's not a walk in the park. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for anybody who's involved with any sport like that. So just coming back to the 23 hours then, the work then is also involved with improving their boat score. For those of you who don't know what a boat score is, it's the length of your comfortable breath hold time after an exhalation. And it gives you some degree of your feedback of breathlessness. So you do the breathe light exercise, and this is down regulation. So if you have an anxious person then going into a race, like it's always that thing, isn't it? Balance of the autonomic nervous system. Absolutely. If you're too anxious, it's going to mess you up.
Yep.
And if you're too relaxed, it's going to mess you up. So to get that balance, you're working with the breathe light, breathe slow.
Yep.
And then you said that with some athletes you need to upregulate. So you have them do breath holds. You might even have them do some hyperventilation if it's controlled.
Yeah, well, everything breathing, when I'm working with an athlete, like they just understand so much more about what their body is going through. They understand, and once they understand, they can influence it. And that's why I'm empowering people, because you're just teaching them about their own body, teaching them that mind-body connection. And, you know, you could almost argue mind and body are the one thing, you know, where is the difference? But
the mind and body should be the one thing, because most of us, especially in the Western world, we have our attention so stuck in our heads and we're so disconnected to the body, you know. And I think it's a really good habit is whenever we go about our daily activity, if you go for a walk, is walk with every cell of the body. If you're going for a swim with every cell of the body, that you disperse your attention throughout the body. And again, there's nothing woo-woo about it. Any of you who are getting turned off, you're thinking it's a bit new agey. Not at all.
To apply this to lifeguarding, Patrick, you know, my goal is to teach people not to panic in rips.
Yeah.
And this will save lives.
Teaching somebody not to panic in a rip is the same as teaching them not to panic in any life situation.
Absolutely.
But we're not taught how to deal with stress. You know, we spend 12 to 16 years of formal education. We come out of it, we're not able to concentrate, and we're not able to handle stress. Like for me, I don't know, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, it's where do you think breathing is going in Australia? Do you see a trajectory happening? What do you see happening?
Yeah, it's popular. It's very popular.
What has driven it?
Wim Hof, well, the
Wim Hof. Yeah.
Wim's been huge for breathing, but that brings people into breath awareness.
Yeah.
And once they get breath awareness, I think that brings them into the oxygen advantage.
The foot is in the door. I think
some of the OA and the Buteyko people, you know, they're maybe not so into, you know, controlled hyperventilation. Whereas I believe the breath awareness is key. I want people to have breath awareness. And, you know, I trained with Wim years ago. I'm not a Wim Hof instructor anymore, but yeah, I do love the technique because it gets people loving breathing. And once they love breathing, then they really understand breathing light and how powerful it is.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think Wim Hof has done amazing things in terms of the awareness out there.
The ice bath as well. We were just talking about stress, right? When you put people in an ice bath, and I spoke to you about sort of using oxygen advantage techniques before and during an ice bath, and it is a great way to teach people to breathe light. You put them in a stressful situation, and then they take their shoulders come up, they go to that mouth breathing, they go to that fast breathing, they go to that shallow breathing, and we want to just get them to relax, breathe slowly, lightly, and deeply. And it's a really powerful tool.
Do you think part of that is also a psychological? It's not just hormesis that it's causing a physiological adaptation, but you're putting somebody into an ice bath, and the tendency is there to panic because it's really cold, but they're feeling very uncomfortable. They're feeling stressed, and you're having them relax or surrender into the stress. So if you can relax when you're getting into an ice bath, and if you can stay calm in the cold, well, then you can transfer that ability to stay calm when difficult situations arise. Do you think there might be something going on there?
Absolutely. Training people to deal with stress is, part of what I say that I do. I empower people to deal with stress and influence stress, and that improves performance, both physical and cognitive.
Do you ever see different personalities? There's some people more, if you have, say, a type A personality or an extrovert versus an introvert, do you ever notice any difference in personalities getting into the ice baths?
Yeah, some people are trying to do everything. You've got those type A personalities that they're doing triathlons and they're meditating and they're doing yoga and they're doing their weights. They've got a Whoop band and an Aura ring. They're trying to do too much.
And how do those guys fare? In terms of, do you ever see a particular personality trait in the ice, or is it just that everybody kind of approaches it with the same demeanor?
Yeah, what do I see? People are quite fearful of the ice. Although it's becoming, where I live in Bondi, in Australia, it's like the epicenter of health in Australia. There's organic shops. There's, people are up training at 5 or 6 in the morning. There's yoga studios and personal trainers, and we are really amongst health and wellness. There's models and celebrities, and a lot of focus. There's hundreds of gyms within a 5-kilometer radius of me.
So it's very much part of the culture. So people are going to give it a go. It's spreading.
It's a huge part of the culture.
I don't think you have to say to anybody that Bondi is in Australia. I think Bondi is probably one of the more well-known destinations in the world and the planet. It's really interesting. So I'm thinking about bringing it to a close because we've been talking for almost 1 hour, and time flies, Dean. So you're giving instructor training and Oxygen Advantage in Sydney and also in other parts of Australia.
Yeah, it's got Melbourne coming up in when's that, 10th and 12th March, and
2023.
2023. Yeah, it's not too far away, and you're coming out in November, which is always exciting.
I'm looking forward to that.
I hope to get you at the beach this time. You're a very busy man. And we might even get you in a stressful situation. Get you in the ripper and the current, and play with those hormetic stresses firsthand.
I'm looking forward to it because if you see now the weather that we have out here, this is my front garden, and grey skies and wide open. So heading to Australia in November is going to be pretty cool to get some of that vitamin D and a bit of light exposure.
You can see my sunburnt nose, actually.
So Dean, it's been a pleasure. And final thoughts?
Always a pleasure. I'm excited. I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm talking about breathing a lot, more and more work. I love to work with professionals, and then I love to help people with their mental health. So it's so broad and so different. And of course, I had that young girl with asthma. She was in here on Tuesday. What day is it? Wednesday for me, but who knows for the people listening to the podcast. So it's been a sort of fascinating week. Still involved in working at Bondi Rescue as a lifeguard, and again that's dealing with stressful situations for me and other people. And there's no more stressful situation than trying to bring someone back to life. And if you could bottle
how often might it happen? How often might you encounter a situation like that? Would it be once a month or?
No, less. Probably for me in a 22, 23-year career, there's probably been about 20 resuscitations that I've been involved in, maybe 25. And that is just
still a
full-on sensation. Now, some of those have been suicides, which has been tragic. But yeah, you know, in Australia, 4,000 people kill themselves every year. You know, I talked about 400 people drowning. We've got sort of 10 times that committing suicide, which is horrible. But again, another area where breathwork is so important.
Absolutely.
And where I've seen huge success in helping people with their mental health and connecting mind to body, which are, as we know,
absolutely. And these are the tools that we should be learning in school, you know, because we all get into situations can unfold, and we get consumed by thought, and we're drowning in thought. And if we continuously drown in thought over a period of weeks and months and years, and, you know, it is a recipe for where do we take it? And giving people that capacity to be able to stop thinking. And we can learn to stop thinking. I know it's not always easy because the mind runs off, but what's the alternative? The alternative is living in our heads. And we've all been living in our heads, Dean. You know, I come out of school living in my head, totally immersed in thought, totally racing for the future. You know, it's the education of the future is about, it's not about studying geography. It's not about studying history. We can read that at any time. It's about giving us real life skills, skills that we can use for the rest of our life. And breathing should be in that.
Well, I get so excited when I see young kids coming to my courses, like kids in high school, learning this stuff and interested in health and wellness. And, you know, what I did as a lifeguard, I was saving people, and I've rescued thousands of people, and I see a continuation of that in what I'm doing now, helping people, and in some case saving them. That might not be as pointy, but saving lives
and improving quality of life. And very often the people who will revert towards breathing are people who have had issues. I came across breathing because of my own issues. It seems that you came across yoga initially and breathing because of your life experience. We've all had life experiences. Some are always, though, the good days are better than the bad days. That's the way it is. And
couples, you know, some couples don't sleep in the same bedroom, Patrick, because of snoring and stuff like that. Not only is one of the partners suffering with choking at night, you know, the connection, like I've heard stories of, you know, relationships blooming again from sleeping in the same room. Like it's so beautiful to be able
maybe
to
that's your market. You're going to be the new relationship manager, Dean.
I was thinking about a social media post, and I know we were talking to this, and my girlfriend and I, we were kissing the other morning, and like 10 years ago, or when I would never kiss a girl in the morning because I would have this horrible breath. Just need the right way to share that, and I seem to be sharing it with.
Well, don't worry, it'll grab. All you have to do is take your top off and put in a couple of sexy words in the title, and you'll have more views. That's where social media is. So yeah.
I put some photos up of my partner in her lingerie with the sleep tape on, and we sold a
that
lot
will
of
be absolutely, that will get the most attention. That's the world we're living in today. Anyway, sorry to say.
You know, there's an 8-minute video of me explaining how.
Yeah, that's not going to work. No.
The old tape, and then people watch it. I reshare it, and it's there because, you know, you need the resources to save us saying the same thing over and over again.
Good. Dean, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Patrick, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Oxygen Advantage podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and maybe take the time to leave us a review. The Oxygen Advantage podcast is available from all your podcast providers.